The underworld, also called Hades, is a separate place where people go after they die. It's one of the three main parts of the world. The earliest idea of the afterlife in Greek myths is that, at the moment of death, a person's soul, called the psyche, is separated from their body and taken to the underworld. In the early myths, all dead people were treated the same and lived in a shadowy, dull existence. But in later myths, the idea of judging people after death started to appear, with good and bad people being separated and treated differently. The underworld itself, often called Hades, after the god who rules it, is described as being at the far edges of the earth, either near the outer limits of the ocean or beneath the ground. It's always dark, without sunlight, which is the opposite of the bright world of the living and Mount Olympus, where the gods live. The underworld is also considered invisible, not only because of the constant darkness but also because the name Hades might mean the unseen place. The underworld is meant only for the dead, so living people don't go there, except for a few heroes who made special journeys, like Heracles, Theseus, Orpheus, and maybe Odysseus. In Roman stories, Aeneas also visited the underworld. Rivers play an important role in the landscape of the Greek underworld and have been mentioned in the earliest stories. For example, the ghost of Patroclus talks about gates and a river in Hades, and the ghost of Odysseus's mother, Anticlea, describes many great rivers and terrifying streams. At least 4 specific rivers are mentioned in these myths. A scholar named H.A. Gerber believed that the rivers Charon sailed on in the underworld were a reflection of the sky in Greco-Roman thinking. However, in different mythological stories, there are several bodies of water linked to the underworld. The number and names of these rivers change depending on the source, and their names usually have specific meanings related to death. In the land of the dead, the River Styx, also called the River of Hate, is the main river in the underworld. Its dark waters might make someone an unbeatable god, but more often, it leads to death. The River Styx is one of the main rivers in the Greek underworld and acts as a boundary between the world of the living and the underworld. The name, Styx, means hate in Greek, and it comes from the goddess Styx, who was the daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. Charon, the ferryman, takes the souls of the dead across the river to enter the underworld, but he only does so if he is paid. Traditionally, a coin was placed in the mouth of the dead as payment for Charon. Without this payment, the dead would not be allowed into the underworld and would instead be stuck on the shore for 100 years. Herodotus, a Greek historian from the 5th century BC, believed the source of the River Styx was near Phenios, a village in ancient Greece. This village is located at the base of Mount Cyllene, where the god Hermes was said to have been born. In Dante's writings, the River Styx is found in the 5th circle of hell, where angry sinners are drowned in its murky waters. The gods used the River Styx to make promises. For example, Zeus made a promise to Semele, and because he hadn't kept it, she ended up dying. Similarly, Helios accidentally caused his own son's death when he swore on the river. If a god broke their promise, they had to drink from the foul waters of the Styx, which would cause them to lose their voice for 9 years. This tradition started during the Titan War when the goddess Styx sided with Zeus. After the war, Zeus declared that all promises by the gods would be made in her name. The River Styx was also thought to have magical powers that could make someone invincible. According to legend, infant Achilles was dipped into the river by his mother, which made him invulnerable, except for his ankle, where she held him. Achilles became a famous warrior, but he eventually died when an arrow hit him in his vulnerable ankle, which became known as the Achilles heel. Some ancient historians even believed that Alexander the Great, the king of Macedonia, might have died because he drank water poisoned by the Styx. Modern scientists think the water might have contained a deadly bacteria. In Italy, there is a river called the Alpheus River that partly flows underground, and some people see it as a possible gateway to the underworld where mortals can enter. Couples who believe this is the River Styx throw rings into it to honor the gods of marriage. Another version of the Styx, according to Hesiod's Theogony, is the Mavroneri, a stream in Arcadia, Greece. The name means black water, and the ancient Greeks believed its water was poisonous. They thought that if anyone tried to carry its water in anything other than a container made from a horse's hoof, the container would dissolve. In the real world, we may not have rivers of hate, fire, or pain flowing through our neighborhoods, but many religions and cultures, like the ancient Greeks, have practiced strange burial customs for the dead. These include things like burying the dead with money, jewelry, food, or the Book of the Dead, not burying someone in clothes worn by a living person, to avoid the living person rotting like the corpse, pulling out the nails of the dead, and even tying a camel to the grave of someone who has just died. The Acheron River in the Greek underworld represents more than just a river, it symbolizes sorrow, change, and the boundary between life and death. By looking at Acheron's different roles and meanings, we can learn how ancient cultures understood life and the afterlife. The origins of Acheron are connected to how the ancient Greeks saw the world and the afterlife. Acheron, known as the River of Woe, is one of the 5 rivers that flow through the Greek underworld. Its name brings sadness and despair, as the ancient Greeks believed it was a path for the souls of the dead. Each river in the underworld had its own purpose, but Acheron was specifically linked to the beginning of the soul's journey after death. According to some stories, when souls entered the underworld, they would first come across the Acheron River, where Charon, the grim boatman, would ferry them across. This crossing was seen as the moment the soul left the world of the living and entered the world of the dead, marking an important step in the soul's journey. Acheron represents the emotional and spiritual challenges that souls face after death. The underworld is a complex place, with different regions and beings representing various aspects of death and the afterlife. Acheron plays a key role in this world, symbolizing the first encounter with the reality of death. When souls reach Acheron, they come face to face with the fact that they have died. This river is like the first checkpoint in their journey, where the dead must accept their fate. Crossing the Acheron is not just a physical journey but an emotional and existential one, as souls let go of their earthly attachments and prepare for the trials ahead. Acheron also plays an important role in the structure of the underworld, marking the boundary between the known world and the unknown afterlife. Beyond its waters lie different areas ruled by other gods and spirits, each with its own rules. For example, the Elysian Fields, a place of happiness for the good, are very different from the darker regions where the wicked are punished. Acheron is a threshold that all souls must cross, no matter where they end up. In myths, Acheron is often personified, meaning, it's treated like a living being that represents the sadness and certainty of death. This gives the river more depth, turning it into more than just a part of the landscape. Some ancient poets and artists even depicted Acheron as a dark and serious figure, sometimes seen as a god with control over the fates of the dead who come to him. Crossing the river represents a soul's transformation, where it lets go of its earthly life and prepares for the afterlife. Like many myths where water symbolizes change and renewal, Acheron stands for the journey of moving on after death. It also reflects the grief and sadness felt by those who have died, representing not just personal loss but the shared human experience of mourning. In art and literature, Acheron is often shown as a dark, heavy river filled with sorrow. Additionally, Acheron marks the boundary between the world we know and the unknown mysteries beyond, symbolizing the fears and uncertainties we face about death and what comes next. Crossing the river is a way of confronting the unknown. Because of this, Acheron is often depicted as a powerful, intimidating force in stories and artworks. Acheron's influence goes beyond its mythological origins and has appeared in many forms of art and culture over the years. In literature, it has been a symbol of despair and the human experience, such as in Dante's Inferno, where the river represents the first step into hell. This depiction has influenced many works that followed. In visual art, painters like John Martin and Gustave Doré used Acheron to show the powerful emotions surrounding death, often portraying its dark waters as a symbol of emotional and spiritual struggle. Acheron's influence extends to modern media too, appearing in films, video games, and graphic novels. It's often shown as a scary and challenging place, reminding audiences of ancient fears about death and the unknown, while adding depth to these stories. The Phlegethon River is one of the 5 rivers of the underworld. It's known as the River of Fire because its waters are said to be made of burning flames rather than water. The river flows through the underworld, particularly around the area where the souls of the damned are punished. It symbolizes destruction, pain, and suffering, as its fiery nature reflects the torment faced by those who are in the underworld for their misdeeds. In some stories, Phlegethon is seen alongside other underworld rivers like the Styx and Acheron, each representing different aspects of death and the afterlife. The River of Fire serves as a powerful symbol of the punishment and chaos that comes with death in Greek mythology. For example, in Dante's Inferno, Attila the Hun and Alexander the Great are depicted in the seventh circle of hell, which is reserved for those who committed violent acts, especially against others. This specific part of hell is a river of boiling blood called phlegathon, and the punishment for the souls in this section is based on the level of violence they caused during their lives. Both Attila the Hun and Alexander the Great are shown as being almost fully submerged in this river of boiling blood, with only their eyebrows visible above the surface. This symbolizes the extreme violence they were responsible for during their time on Earth. The more bloodshed and destruction a person caused in life, the deeper they are submerged in the phlegathon. In this case, Dante places Attila and Alexander in one of the deepest levels of the river to reflect their significant roles in causing the deaths of many people. Attila the Hun, known as the Scourge of God, led the Huns in numerous bloody invasions across Europe, while Alexander the Great, though a military genius, also caused widespread destruction in his quest to conquer much of the known world. Their near-total submersion in the river represents the weight of their violent actions. Additionally, centaurs patrol the banks of the river, making sure that no soul tries to escape from the level of punishment they deserve. If anyone tries to rise above their assigned level in the river, the centaurs shoot them with arrows to push them back down. This adds to the imagery of eternal punishment for violence, where the sinners cannot escape their fate. The Cocytus River is one of the 5 rivers. Its name means river of wailing or river of lamentation. It is associated with the sadness and suffering of the souls who are condemned to the underworld. The river represents the cries and endless grief of the dead as they mourn their fate. In Dante's Inferno, the Cocytus appears in a different way. It is not a river but a frozen lake in the 9th circle of hell, where traitors are punished. The souls of the worst sinners, including those who betrayed their family, country, or friends, are trapped in the ice of Cocytus, frozen up to different levels depending on their sins. In both versions, Cocytus is a symbol of sorrow, grief, and punishment for the souls of the dead. Lethe, pronounced Lethe, is one of the 5 rivers in Hades. In Greek, Lethe means forgetting, oblivion, or hiding. In mythology, Lethe was also the name of a spirit connected to forgetfulness and oblivion. The Lethe River was said to flow through the caves of Hypnos, the god of sleep. The entrance to the cave was surrounded by poppies and other plants that made people sleepy. No light or sound ever entered the cave. The river was near Elysium, a paradise where only heroes and mortals related to gods went to live happily forever. Everyone who drank from the Lethe River experienced forgetfulness, and the soft sound of the river made people feel sleepy. When the souls of the dead entered the afterlife, they had to drink from the river to forget their past lives and prepare for reincarnation. The story of the myth of Air tells about a man who died in battle and had an amazing experience in the afterlife, including encountering the Lethe River. 10 days after the battle, when the bodies were being collected, Air's body hadn't decomposed. Air had traveled to the afterlife with many other souls and reached a strange place with 4 openings. 2 openings went into and out of the sky, and the other 2 went into and out of the ground. Judges directed the souls, sending the bad ones downward and the good ones upward. When Air arrived, the judges told him to stay and observe everything so he could report back to the living. The souls coming down from the sky talked about happy and uplifting experiences, while the souls coming up from below described sadness and suffering. After 7 days, Air and the other souls went to a place where a glowing rainbow filled the sky. Here, they were given tickets with numbers on them. When their number was called, they had to choose their next life. Air noticed that many souls picked a life completely opposite to their previous one. For example, someone who had been good chose to be a dictator, and a soul that had been an animal chose to be human. Bad souls chose humble, virtuous lives. Next, Air and the others went to the plain of oblivion, where the Lethe River flowed. Each soul had to drink a certain amount from the river. As they drank, they forgot their past lives and were sent off to start their new journeys. Air was only allowed to watch and didn't drink from the river, so he kept his memories. He woke up on top of a funeral pyre, remembering everything from his journey through the afterlife because he hadn't drunk from Lethe. One figure, Ithalides, couldn't have his memories erased by the Lethe River. He was the son of Hermes and part of the Argonauts. Even though he drank from the river and was reincarnated many times as Euphorbus, Hermotius, Pyrrhus, and finally Pythagoras, he could still remember all his past lives and the knowledge he gained. His memory was so strong that even the Lethe River couldn't make him forget. Oceanus is not just a river but actually a giant mythological river that was believed to surround the entire world. The ancient Greeks thought of Oceanus as the source of all the world's fresh water. Rivers, lakes, and even rain were thought to flow from it. It wasn't a regular river but more like a massive endless stream that encircled the land. Oceanus was also considered a god, one of the Titans, who represented this great river. He was the son of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth, and he was married to Tethys, another Titan. Together, they had many children, known as the river gods and ocean nymphs, who were responsible for the waters on earth.